So you mentioned the two companies, Pfizer and Moderna, that are making the vaccines that we know about now. Are there any important differences between those two vaccines, and will the public be able to choose which vaccine they may get?
There are no differences in the vaccine safety. There's no difference in how well they work. They're made by two different companies. They both work in the same way. They both have the messenger RNA, which produces the spike protein, and both of them, within about 2 weeks, give you significant immunity. People at about 2 weeks after their first injection are much less likely to get COVID, and both work really well, 95% of the time. And for a vaccine, especially a first vaccine, this is really good. There's some subtle differences. Both require 2 shots, but the Pfizer vaccine, you get the shot on day 21 after 3 weeks. The Moderna vaccine, you get the shot on day 28 after 4 weeks. The Pfizer vaccine has to be kept at ultra cold temperatures, negative 93 Fahrenheit. That's like being on Antarctica. It has to be kept on dry ice. It has to be kept on special freezers. It is much harder to handle. The Moderna vaccine also has to be kept refrigerated, but not in an ultra cold way, and it's easier to handle. And right now, people are getting the vaccine that's available. You have to remember that in the United States, there are about 330 million people, and so far we have 20 million doses of the vaccine. So we're giving it to healthcare workers first. We're giving it to nursing home residents first. We're going to give it to first responders next. We're going to give it to people who are at high risk of dying if they get COVID. But most people are going to end up getting the vaccine that's available. You won't be able to go to your pharmacy and say, oh, I'd like the Moderna vaccine or I'd like the Pfizer vaccine. It's almost certainly going to be what's available at the time. There are not large differences between the vaccine. Both of the vaccine have allergic reactions, something called anaphylaxis, which is a severe allergic reaction. And about 1 out of 100,000 doses. That's higher than most vaccines. Most vaccines are about 1 in a million. On the other hand, people who get COVID, so the youngest people, the healthiest people, about 1 out of 1,000 die. So literally, your risk of dying if you get COVID is roughly 100 times more than your risk of having a non-fatal reaction to the vaccine. That's only for younger people. So if you're my age, in your 50s, you have a 1 or 2% chance of dying. Now that doesn't sound really bad. You'll see, people on Facebook going, 99% of the people survive this disease, but that's 1 out of 100. So you have a 1 out of, if I got COVID, I'd have a 1 out of 100 chance of dying from COVID, compared to a 1 out of 100,000 chance of a non-fatal reaction for the vaccine. For me, getting the vaccine, and incidentally, I had my first dose about 3 weeks ago. All I got was a little bit of a sore arm and no other side effects. But my chances of dying are 1,000 times more. My chance of dying from COVID are 1,000 times more from a non-fatal reaction to the vaccine. Now, older people, if you're 70, you have a roughly 1 in 10 chance of dying from COVID. So you have a 10,000, your risk of dying from COVID is 10,000 times your risk of the vaccine. People often say, well, the vaccine just came out, so they're not sure of the side effects. That's absolutely true. This has been around much shorter, and often rare side effects from vaccine come out when we start to give it to a million people, 10 million people. But the key word there is rare. So it is not, even for a young person, rare to die from COVID, 1 out of 1,000 cases. It's common if you're above the age of 70, somewhere we're about 1 out of 10 cases. And the risk, and 4,000 people yesterday in the United States died from COVID. That's the equivalent of more than a 9/11. We've been having the equivalent of one 9/11 every day in the United States. So often we're taking vaccines for kind of rare causes. We vaccinate people all the time for rabies. We've had 18 cases of rabies in the last 20 years in the United States. We see 4 or 5 cases of measles every year in the United States. And we vaccinate everyone precisely because then if someone gets measles, it doesn't spread. It prevents, and rabies, for example, is fatal. On the other hand, we're seeing 200,000 of cases of COVID every day. We're seeing 2,000 to 3,000 deaths every day. And if you are, especially young people, if you are not vaccinated, you will get COVID. So everyone who is not vaccinated will eventually get the disease. Because right now it's going very quickly through the population. The way we will end this is with vaccination.
Thanks for joining us every Friday at noon for Community Conversations with Mayor Papenfuse, where we bring you the latest news and updates from right here in the city. We want to hear from you. What topics do you want to see in an upcoming edition? We look forward to hearing from you, and we look forward to seeing you on the next Facebook Live Community Conversations.